and welcome to the Zoom room where we chat about news and stories from the creative industries. I'm really excited to introduce our guest to you today, Australian casting director Stevie Ray. Welcome to the Zoom room, Stevie.
Hi dudes, thank you for having me.
So Stevie, it's just occurred to me we have such an eclectic audience. Not everyone might be aware of what is a casting director and what do you do? Can you tell us a little bit about your creative platform and perhaps what a day in the office might look like for you?
Yeah, sure. Well, ostensibly, my casting director is a consultant that works in film and television and is responsible for helping to collate options for who might be right for specific roles in a feature film or a TV series or a TV commercial, music video, short film, online series, just basically anything that's got performers in it or that needs performers. We are there to act as kind of a filter for the director and the producer to go, okay, if there's this many actors out there for this particular role, you probably really only want to look at this little group. Let's just hone it in for you so you don't have to wade through all that, which we've already done, and we'll just give you the best people we think will be right for the job. And then, just working with them over time, and that might be a mixture of just purely creative conversations about individual actors we're all familiar with who could be right for this or that role, and some actors that it is necessary to audition them for the part to see what they might bring to it if they're a little bit more untried or untested, or just not at that stage of their career where it's really not expected that they should need to audition because they are of a certain profile that makes them more relevant, and where there is probably enough work of theirs extant for you to see without having to make them audition. So it's sort of a mixture of those processes to eventually help the director settle in on exactly who plays what role.
So definitely never a dull moment in the casting room, no doubt.
Yeah, no, there's always lots to do, and also every job is just very different from the last. It's a very funny, strange, particular thing, casting that's unique to each individual project.
Wonderful. So thinking about the current climate at the moment with COVID-19, what sort of impacts have you experienced? How have you been handling isolation?
Well, obviously for us, it basically made it impossible for us to really host auditions as we would normally do in our own studio, because, for any given project, we might have 20, 30, sometimes 150 people through the door on any given day, and there's just no way that you can separate everybody or be sanitizing enough, and ultimately we'd have been pretty seriously in contravention of the government rules about self-isolating and working from home. So basically, once it was self-isolation time, we almost all of us went home and worked from home. I stayed in the office myself for one extra week, and then fairly quickly worked out how to try and do our jobs online, and that's obviously lots of these working off of Zoom.
Yeah.
Having actors send in self-taped auditions, so getting them to record themselves on their computers or on their phone, and sending those videos into us. Working out how to do recalls over Zoom with the director on one computer, on their computer, and us here facilitating, and the actor on their computer at home. Just slowly over time, working out the best way forward. And however, of course, most of the jobs that we were working on pretty much pulled up stumps, were either cancelled outright or postponed to some other day. So that did mean that our workload dropped off quite precipitously right from the get-go. But there is a handful of TV series that we were working on that weren't planning to shoot until probably July, August, or September, or at least start then. So those were projects we could continue with. Then there was, we did a nice TV commercial for the Commonwealth Bank, which just came out, and that was messaging that was specifically about COVID-19 and the bank's response to it. So it was very quick, a quick turnaround. There's a lot of roles. It was a nice little job just to kind of drop in that particular spot. And now, you know, that we're sort of emerging from the other side, I think there's a lot of productions, both, you know, TV commercial or drama work, that are all trying to plan and work out how they're going to persevere, and that's a mixture of working out that they can get appropriately insured, because that's a massive issue. You know, what kind of protocols they need in place on set, how many crew, depending on the location or the studio that they might be shooting in, nurses to take temperatures, and, you know, apparatus, personal, you know, protective equipment, and all that kind of stuff. They're trying to work out their protocols to see if it's viable for them to shoot as soon as possible. So, and actually, funnily enough, too, quite a steep increase in US-based or offshore TV commercials that, because the UK and the US are in a much more dire straits than we are in Australia, they all still want to follow their timeline they had for their jobs. So they're looking at other countries that they can have things shot at and work remotely with us. So yeah, there's been an increase in jobs that I've been quoting on. We just had one confirmed yesterday that we're just about to kick into, which is great. Yeah, that's been a unique situation that happened because of the COVID virus.
Absolutely. What's been a surprise to you during this time, as far as, you know, this massive transition to, you know, global transition to online communities that we've had? Is there anything that you know, stood out to you or felt quite different, or you know, been a positive thing?
Well, I think in terms of professionally, I feel like I've ended up having a number of conversations with people about projects that were a little bit like pushed under the rug for a minute because they might have gotten too busy on other projects. So that was kind of nice, because there was a couple of really lovely, there was a documentary that I was working on last year that kind of got shelved a little bit, but they had time to revisit how they're going to persevere. And there's a particular way in which I'm relevant to helping them get people on board for. And, you know, another friend who was thinking of what else he could do and came up with an idea for an interview show that we had a few conversations. And I don't know, some of these things you go, well, maybe they won't necessarily lead to a finished product, but they certainly could. And this space creates some time for a lot of people to go, oh yeah, right, what else? There was another thing I was going to do that I had that conversation 2 years ago and I've forgotten what it was. Oh, that's right. And, you know, dust off some of those projects that could be really awesome. So that was kind of nice. Ultimately, in terms of my actual day-to-day job, it's frustrating. I want to be in studio with the actors, giving direction, even just this from a simple kind of logistical purpose of just actually getting people to do exactly what you need them to do. It's hard to give them instruction and then receive a video that hopefully they listen to everything you said and they watch the video guide that you sent all the way through, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So the quality of my work ends up slightly suffering because I'm relying on other people ultimately to kind of to do that bit that I am quite good at, which is giving direction, getting footage, getting exactly what the director needs to see to make a call on it. So that's certainly been very frustrating, particularly with the TV commercials, because they are often little bitsy parts where there's no dialogue, but you need to walk through the door and pick up the pram, and then that's supposed to, you trip over a thing before you look up and see the spacecraft. Like,
absolutely.
you know, they're always nuts things, right? So trying to be concise and clear and show people what to do, there's only so far you can go when you don't have them in the room to be able to ask you questions and answer them ultimately. So anyway, so it was a very long-winded answer to that question.
I just, and I imagine, like, you know, you would like to spend that bit of time with the actor redirecting them, and to not have that luxury at the moment would be...
It's frustrating. I mean, you know, we get to do recalls, but you still want that initial audition that a director is going to look at to be as good as you can make it, you know, without their input. And not having that opportunity is a little frustrating. But then of course we move to Zoom to do recalls, and we get the director there to go, all right, let's do this and let's do that. But even for the director, you can feel that they want to be there in the room. They want to get up and they want to do the other part with you, or they want to, you know, physically show you something. It can be equally frustrating for directors, I think, too. So that's a challenge for everybody moving forward until we're truly at a point at which we can just get back to normal.
Absolutely. Yeah. What is it about the performing arts and the creative industries that you think helps people during a time like this?
Well, I mean, outside of obviously direct employment of, you know, arts professionals, outside of, you know, actors and directors, producers, crew, and everybody, for the average punter, I just, without the arts, without there to be something to watch, what does anybody do? Like, what on earth do any of us do? And not just watching TV, but reading a book, or, you know, where that bookcase there is filled with hours upon hours upon hours of meaningful distraction from an otherwise, I don't even know what I do. If I don't have the art, I don't even know what anybody does. I mean, you know, obviously there's been quite a furor and a backlash against the federal government for not extending the JobKeeper program to arts professionals. And, you know, part of me is like, you know what? Get stuffed, everyone. That's it. We're just pulling the plug on TV shows. You can get stuffed. You can watch nothing. You can read nothing. You can have no music. You have no art galleries, and now entertain yourselves, you bunch of jerks. That's partly. I get a little bit like, you know, I could use stronger language, but there's part of me that goes, turn it all off then. All right. You don't want to pay for it. You don't want to encourage it. You don't want to foster it. You don't want to, you know, encourage fledgling artists to hone their craft and become, you know, the next industry leaders that in turn, through their work, produce economic return to the country that's quite significant. Then go get stuffed. You can, you know, twiddle your thumbs, mate. You know, if you don't think that the arts are relevant to you or important to you in your life, then you are absolutely fooling yourself. Without that, I just don't even know. I don't even know what you do. I mean, and like, when you really look at it, it extends to so much. Like, you know, music, writing, journalism, video games, you know, animation. There's so much that is so heavily dependent on creativity and arts practices that I think people, I don't know, they just don't realize
Yeah.
that there's people whose lives and livelihoods depend on being bailed out by the government like every other freaking industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
it's no more or less important than making sure that the supermarket chains are able to stay open and keep supplying food, and the freight infrastructure to ship food around to everybody is just as important as, it's like, cool, I got food and I got shelter, great, I'm alive, now what do I do? I indulge in the arts, otherwise, yeah. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah.
It's a bit shocking how little people credit the arts for saving their otherwise humdrum lives.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lack of awareness, and particularly, from our perspective as, educators as well, we're constantly having to change the mindsets of students that sort of come in not with this, unawareness that the arts, and as you said before, thinking about things like animation and video games and, web design, and they're massive leaders in their economic contribution to Australia. And I think that there's a lack of awareness around that. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that old weird notion of like, oh, well, if you're going to get involved in the arts, well, that's not a real job and you should be sensible and go and become a lawyer or a whatever or a doctor. It's like, yeah, it is a real job, and it does require some very unique skills that equally take time to hone and practice as any other profession takes as well. Doctors take whatever it is, 7 or 8 years to get through their degree to become practitioners, and architects and take their 7 years, and throw 7 years on an actor, and the person that popped in at the beginning and pops out at the end of 7 years will be two very, very different people. One will be probably far more talented and more interesting than the one that started 7 years ago.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And the only reason really why it feels like it might be a risky career move is because it is not properly funded by the government. That is the only reason why it's not. Arts needs patronage. It's the only way that you can move forward. And there's simple ways of thinking of it too, like the TV commercials that we work on and that actors do and get paid handsomely for. That's arts patronage. That actually, in a weird way, even though the brand doesn't realize it, they think they're just trying to get people to buy their products. But in a way, they're actually patronizing the arts. And so that's really incredibly important for a lot of people to, particularly actors, obviously, to pay their rent, get paid off a decent ad. That's no less important than the higher-minded, worthy feature films and TV series that we make as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So thinking and reflecting on your time in isolation, what was the last thing that you nerded out on, or you're hoping to?
Oh God. I guess, funnily enough, I bring it up because I have spent quite a bit of time playing video games, which is a bit embarrassing at my age. But I grew up in that era when, computers, home computers and computer gaming just first started. So it's embedded in my psyche from a young age. So I do return to video games as a form of relaxation and escapism. And certainly in this modern era where there is so much ability to have connectivity with other players and other friends, and it is more social. It's lovely to be able to get on and play a game with a friend and, you know, talk rubbish and try and beat each other. It's, you know, simple, nerdy competition. So that's what I've nerded out on in the true nerd sense. But otherwise, yeah, just like everybody else, just binge watching lots of TV series. I got my assistant Josh put me onto a show called Money Heist, which is on Netflix, and it's a Spanish production that is thankfully subtitled because I don't speak Spanish. But it's this kind of ludicrous, you know, bank robbery kind of series with lots of like sexy times and romance, and it's completely silly but very, very fun, and it's very well made actually, but it's a total soap. And I didn't quite realize what I was in for until I watched all of the first season. I was like, right, 13 eps, wow, that was a lot. 13 hours, that's okay. And then lo and behold, season 2, as soon as I'd finished, season 2 popped up. There's another 13 hours. I'm like, oh my God. And then I finally finished watching that, and it had finished its sort of narrative arc. I was like, great, good, done. That was 26 hours of that silly show.
Wow.
And I messaged Josh and went, done, that was great fun, very silly and entertaining. And he went, yeah, I just finished season 4. I'm like, see, what are you talking about? I can't. And so now, of course, season 3 was another 8 eps. Season 4 was another 8 eps. So now I've watched 42 hours of these guys, and I've got to say, and it's still not finished, mind you. I now have to watch the next series, but I'd equally be happy to be done with it. But they've got me now. I can't let go.
Perfect. Well, if that's not supporting the arts, then I don't know.
That's right.
What is? Well, thank you so much for your time, Stevie, joining us in the Zoom room today. It was wonderful.
No problem.